you have some other interesting research actually right now that's going on that I want to talk about. So interesting topic around fat shaming and humiliating another person for this. And so you have a study going on right now with Grace Lemon, one of my other faves, on this very topic. So can you talk a little bit more about that study and where it's at?
So, Grace and I joined DePaul at the same time in 2012, and for a long time, we had talked about ways of combining our respective research interests. Hers is very squarely in the space of employee engagement and well-being, and mine is on the harassment and nastiness that people experience at work.
Yeah.
And we talked at length about ways to try to combine our interests and study nastiness in the space of understanding its implications for employee health and well-being, kind of getting at sort of the second layer of implications, not just sort of the immediate performance stuff, but how does this rumination affect the way that people think about their work and engage with others? And we also really wanted to think about not just sort of nastiness in general, but were there sort of specific things happening to specific people that we need to more deeply and better understand. And part of this was informed by research done by others that looks at how overweight individuals are treated differently in the formal hiring processes and how their performance is formally evaluated differently, how people who are larger size are not paid the same. And the research there is clear that larger individuals tend to be hired at lower rates, compensated at lower rates. Their performance is not valued as
Hmm.
highly as it should be. And a lot of it boils down to the belief that people who are larger are not competent. They are not as smart as their
Or
thin
disciplined or yeah.
counterparts, and that they are not as likable individuals either. And that gets in the way of people being willing to develop relationships with you and connect and collaborate with you. And so the research on the formal consequences of this discrimination against individuals who are larger is fantastic and is well out there in the literature. But what was less prevalent is how individuals who are larger experience work on a daily basis and the extent to which they may be subject to some of the nasty, harassing behaviors that we know exist, but that would be specifically targeted against individuals because of their physical size.
This is unbelievable and like breaks my heart and just be good people. People, what the heck? This is terrible.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So that is really kind of where the idea of studying weight-based bullying and harassment
Yeah.
was born out of. And our initial effort was really to understand sort of when we talk about weight-based bullying and mistreatment, what does that mean? Our research has focused on kind of establishing sort of the space around what is weight-based harassment, and then trying to document the base rate of it with a large sample of workers in the United States to just get a sense of how prevalent is this and what does it look like, and then what are the implications for people who experience this type of nastiness as
So
well.
is there a lot of research in this area?
So the research on this more informal sort of harassment and
Yeah.
negativity, there's not a ton. And so
Okay.
we felt like we also had the opportunity to contribute to the conversation that's being had
Yeah.
about the way that people of all sizes are treated in the
Yeah.
workplace. And so we're also trying to approach this from the vantage point of as we think about differences in the workplace, size is also a difference, and we see that people are treated differently because of their size.
Yeah.
And so as we start to think about how to inform the conversation about difference and inclusion in the workplace, we want to be able to speak to this from the perspective of diversity and inclusion,
Yeah.
and bring some insights to that conversation as well.
And I'm assuming some of it's unconscious bias, like the salary and things like that is.
Yes and no.
Okay.
So there's absolutely evidence to show that there's unconscious bias that exists against overweight individuals, related to sort of the competence and the likability
Yeah.
components. But some of it is downright open, overt, nastiness.
Yeah.
And we're part of this research is also trying to appreciate what rationale perpetrators of this nastiness
Yeah.
offer
Interesting.
as the rationale for why they are instigating this behavior. And we know some of it is going to be from unconscious bias, but there's also, we're just starting to understand how individuals rationalize having a negative thought about a colleague because of their size and then acting on it. And our work is suggesting that some people are saying and doing negative things to their colleagues because they feel like they have an obligation to comment on someone's health as if the manifestation of weight is perfectly within someone's control.
Yeah.
The research on sort of the origins of weight suggests that it's largely a function of your genetics, that you have some ability to control it through eating habits and regular exercise, but on the margin, those are on the margin. But the common perception is that if you just ate differently and exercised more and had some control over your habits, that you would conform to what, at least in the US society, is considered sort of the acceptable body size.
Yeah.
The medical literature is pretty clear that that's not the case, but that that misunderstanding presumably is what's giving a lot of perpetrators the leeway to say, something like, "Hey, Karen, you want to go grab lunch? You know what? There's a new salad place down the street. Why don't we go check that out?" Or,
Yeah, you could use a salad.
You had a cheeseburger yesterday for lunch. Is that really, is that really a good idea? Or, comments like that, and unless you're a medical professional, you probably have no idea or no business commenting on what, someone is or isn't doing, because we also know from research that health exists at many different sizes, and yet your size is one very clear sort of physical indicator that people are going to feel licensed to comment on in ways that are completely inappropriate and completely out of bounds. But we also live in a society that valorizes thinness and sort of the thin ideal.
Yeah.
And where we see, leaders who perpetuate beliefs about, what's important in terms of people's size, and associate that with competence and capabilities, and make judgments about people that are completely off base. But it doesn't stop people from shaming people as well.
Yeah. I'm curious what you find on the rationale part of it, because you wouldn't do it to a different group. You wouldn't marginalize a different group based on some other characteristic. But why is it okay for this characteristic?
So we're going to explore that more fully, but I've got to believe, that it comes from this belief that your weight is largely within your control. And if you just made better choices or different choices, that you wouldn't find yourself the size that you are. And so the completely misguided bully who shames you for your size, in effect, is sort of giving you a hard time because, the belief is you've let yourself get this way.
Yeah.
And if you just made a different choice, then you wouldn't find yourself in this situation. But weight is largely not a choice.
Yeah.
It is a function of a lot of other factors. But we see, you wouldn't come to this same rationale for shaming someone because of their gender, their race,
Yeah.
You wouldn't shame, we're making inroads here, but we still see some of this in terms of shaming people for their LGBTQ status because the
Yeah.
belief that it's a choice. It's not,
Yeah.
it is who you are. And so I think some of it is the belief that this is, your choice. But I don't know about you, but I don't know anyone who would choose to then want to find themselves the target of someone else's nastiness.
Yeah. Yeah.
So those pieces don't line up.
I had good
And I think
genetics.
some of
I
it
feel like.
too is also just a function of our culture. We live in a culture where it is okay to put people down in very, very public ways. And so that also gives license, I think, to some of these comments that would otherwise not be appropriate.